Hi guys, my name is Ranger Maggie and I'm standing here at the gun deck of the Castillo de San Marcos National Monument. Behind me here is one of the coolest features of the gun deck, which is the bell tower. So back in those days, in the 17 and 1800s, they didn't have cell phones or radios or anything like that. So in order to communicate, it was essential to have a bell. So this tower would have had a bell hanging up high in the top that a soldier could ring to let the town know when there were ships coming. Those ships could be enemy ships or they could be supply ships. So they would have had two different types of bells sound to ring to let people know the difference. Now, if you see there's a window up there also, that window had a platform where a soldier could stand lookout. That soldier was up higher, so it meant they could see even farther out to see if there were any enemy ships or supply ships coming into the Castillo de San Marcos.
So guys, here we are right underneath the bastion of St. Carlos, where the tower and the bell are. There have been many myths spoken about this little section underneath, that this is the actual dungeon where they kept prisoners and they tortured them or they left them to die of starvation and such. I hate to disappoint, but this is actually a myth. Really what the space is about is just to keep the gunpowder for the cannons, nothing more. The reason it's so dark and tenebrous is because they just wanted to make sure that the humidity wouldn't spoil the gunpowder. That's all it is. Other than that, there's another space right adjacent to it, but all of it really was just storage, and that's it.
We're in the quarries where coquina is formed. As you can see, there are lots of tiny shells. When they're compressed over time, they form coquina naturally.
Castillo de San Marcos was built entirely of a stone called coquina. In fact, it is the only local stone we have here in St. Augustine. Coquina is a sedimentary stone that's formed when seashells are compressed together underground for hundreds of thousands of years. Carbonic acid leaches through the ground down into the seashells, leaches calcium out of the shells, and that begins to bond it together into a stone. The stone is very porous, so when it is first quarried, it has a lot of moisture in it. The Spanish would quarry the stone on Anastasia Island, bring the blocks across the Matanzas River on barges to the workyard of the Castillo, which was about where our parking lot is today. The slabs would sit out in the sun for 6 months to a year to dry out all that moisture, and then the masons would chop it down into smaller, more manageable building blocks and build the Castillo. Now, because coquina is a very porous stone, it had to be plastered to waterproof it. The Spanish plastered the Castillo inside and out to waterproof the stone. But that disadvantage of the porousness is also an advantage, because when you fire cannonballs into a thick wall of coquina, instead of shattering under the impact, it compresses like you're shooting BBs into styrofoam. You get a cannonball-sized hole that's less than 2 feet deep. And because the walls of the Castillo are anywhere from 9 to 18 feet thick, less than 2 feet of damage was not a big deal. Coquina was used because it was the only local stone available to build a permanent fortress, but it turned out to be the best thing they could have used to stand up to cannon fire. In October of 1837, about 2 years into the Second Seminole War, the U.S. Army captured Osceola and about 200 other Seminole Indians just west of St. Augustine under a flag of truce, and brought them here to Castillo de San Marcos, which was then known as Fort Marion, and held them as prisoners of war. About a month after their incarceration began, there was an escape. Another warrior named Kawakachi, or Wildcat as he was known in English, led 19 others in an escape from Fort Marion. And that's about all we know for sure. The details of the escape are very fuzzy. The most popular legends have it that the Seminoles starved themselves until they were thin enough to squeeze out the little windows on the western side of the fort. However, the Army records do not specify exactly which room they were held in or escaped from, and they don't say how they got out. We do know that the fact that they escaped was much more important than how. Coaqui resurfaced, fighting the U.S. Army a couple months later, and he was a very important leader throughout the rest of the Second Seminole War, which would drag on for another 5 years. And, according to Chief Justice Willie Johns of today's Seminole tribe of Florida, most of the Seminoles still living in Florida today trace their heritage back to those 20 Seminoles who escaped from Fort Marion in 1837. So the details of how they got out really are not as important as the fact that they did, because that escape had a huge impact on the future of the entire Seminole tribe of Florida.
Hey guys, so here's another location that'll be of high interest. This is Avila Street, originally called Hospital Street. The reason being is because, as you can see over there, there's the Spanish Military Hospital Museum, which I'll show you in a little bit. But outside of that, this is, believe it or not, the oldest street in the oldest settlement, European settlement here in the United States. So this is a really, really old street, but this is something that is of high interest. It's right across from the Plaza de Constitución. So in all of these locations, as I said, is little bits of history popping up alive here in Saint Augustine. Hey guys, welcome to the Spanish Military Hospital Museum. Actually, this is another location that's historical here in Saint Augustine. Not many people know that this hospital did exist from 1783 all the way up until 1821.
In fact, they were the most advanced in all of Europe and England. This is because they were influenced very early on by the Moors. The Moors had occupied Spain for over 700 years. During this time, they were advanced in all the sciences and mathematics. They had saved the teachings of the Greeks, the Romans, and the Egyptians. Okay, now the next one up is bullet removal. Now the good news is they just had little round balls of lead for their bullets. They did not penetrate as deeply or do quite as much damage. But they also didn't have x-ray machines or decent lighting. Now the surgeons here, they relied on their tools to find the bullet and get it out. The first one he always used, his finger. If he felt that bullet, he pulled it out. Now this was the second tool he would use. It is his probe, a metal stick, and the tip was coated in porcelain. That's because when lead touches porcelain, it always leaves a mark. So he would stick it in and wiggle it around, hoping to find the bullet. He would know because when he hit something hard and pulled it out, there's going to be a mark there. Yes. Now once that was done, he grabbed his concave forceps. Now these are cool. See how they're indented?
Sure.
He would stick them in, wrap them around that bullet, get a good tight grip. Now once it was out, they would pour vinegar water in. They knew that along with the bullet had gone pieces of his clothing, dust, dirt, maybe even a leaf or a twig. They were hygienic, so they flushed it. And that helped them to keep infection out because vinegar water kills germs.